guys, it's Sam, and this is my spoiler-free review for A Dowry of Blood by ST Gibson. This is a standalone adult gothic horror retelling of Dracula. It does not follow Dracula's actual plot line, but this is basically the story of the brides of Dracula. In particular, it's following like the first bride, Constanta, and the story of the abusive relationship with Dracula, written in second person as if to Dracula through letters. So this is a depiction of an abusive relationship. What's nice about this is the author does have trigger warnings in the front. So it says flat out, A Dowry of Blood contains depictions of emotional, verbal, and physical intimate partner abuse, gaslighting, war, famine, and plague, blood and gore, consensual sexual content, sadomasochism, self-harm, body horror, violence and murder, alcohol use, depression, and mania. It also contains brief references to sexual assault, not directed at any named character, drug use, and drowning. So, some heavy shit, right? First off, we'll talk about the world building. Like I mentioned, this does not take place along any of the plot points of the actual Dracula story. It's just Dracula as in like a very old vampire turning people. So we have them like throughout time, throughout history, and throughout different places that we get to see, and that's like kind of the extent of the world building. There's like some discussion of like sort of like the vampirism and everything else, but it's mostly that kind of world building and just this like gothic sense of the story and the atmosphere. Our characters are really the focus here, and like the character interactions and relationships and things, those are the most important pieces. So our main character is Constanta. She was a peasant woman who was turned originally by Dracula, not probably his first bride, but like the bride, you know, we have like the three brides of Dracula that we talk about a lot within like the lore of Dracula. I adore her, and I adore her dynamics within this essentially polyamorous relationship eventually. So first we see her and Dracula and her descriptions of him over the years, their relationship, how she reacts to the trauma of this abusive relationship, and then how the other brides do as well, and like how they all sort of bounce off each other and react to things differently. Her big thing is survival. Like she's always gonna survive, and she does more of like a freeze response to trauma, and just, again, has been around the longest of the brides. A little less than halfway through, we meet Magdalena, who is the second bride. She has more of a fawn response. Again, she has this like, she's full of life and whatever, and she knows kind of how to like, you know, not manipulate a situation in a bad way, but like she knows a lot of that. She's very intelligent. That's what draws him to her. And we get this whole discussion of how he essentially gaslights and manipulates Constanta into this polyamorous relationship, but they all, like, this is very queer. This whole story is very queer. So everyone's in love with everyone. Dracula's in love with everyone. Love in the, you know, way abuser loves. And Constanta and Magdalena love each other immediately. So we have some sapphic stuff going on. And then eventually, almost towards the end, we have Alexei coming in, who's actually a man. So we have this Achillean dynamic, and then he is also a part of everything. He kind of fights back against Dracula's abuse, and how they all interact with Dracula and each other is a big part of the story. All three brides, they all still call each other brides. Being mentioned is not a spoiler. One, it's part of like the original myth, and two, it's like on the back as part of the synopsis. And one of the first letters that she writes. So I really liked those three's dynamic with each other, how they differently interact with each other, their feelings that are different towards each other. The one thing that made me slightly uncomfortable was Alexei's the youngest one in age and like time turned, but Constanta says she has a very like maternal almost feeling for him, but then eventually there's also this like desire. Yes, they're all immortal beings. It still feels like a little, So that's the only thing that kind of was like, yeah, don't really love that. But essentially, this is the story of this polyamorous relationship and people overcoming abuse. And Dracula as a abusive husband, boyfriend, whatever, perfect. The way this was written, and like I said all about the triggers, the gaslighting, and just like the way a manipulative, abusive, narcissistic abuse relationship happens, spot on. So again, if you have any triggers around that, this is too real, but so well done. So last time I talked about the plot and just like the writing. This is beautifully written. Like I said, the depiction of this abusive relationship, but also like the lines and like the basically like poetry of like the lines and the beauty and the imagery of all of it. Stunning. I like the structure of this. The passage of time was really evident. I mean, hundreds of years passed, centuries passed, and you can feel that. And the author does a really good job of like depicting a lot of these things and these relationships and these dynamics in such a way with such few lines. And I just really love when authors are able to do that. The ending was like a little like wrapped up in slightly too convenient of a way, but at the same time, this ultimately is like again, a good for her type story, like someone overcoming abuse. So ultimately I'm okay with that, but it felt like a little light for ultimately a gothic horror. But I really love this. I would say this is like a 4 to a 4.5. I want to give it a 5 just from like pure enjoyment, but it's not quite for me. Like, there's a few things that I mentioned kind of getting tripped up in, but ultimately really adore this. I can see why this was picked up. This was originally, I believe, either indie or self-published, and this was picked up by a traditional publisher this year, and I can totally see why. So comment below, let me know what you thought of A Dowry of Blood. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.